My name is Kyle Bush. I am a software engineer. I'm going to go through some different things throughout my education, throughout my experience in building a career in computer science. And yeah, so just to go into a little bit more about me, I graduated high school in 2019. I then went to the University of New Orleans and got a bachelor's degree in computer science. And then while I was there, I'm going to go through some different internships and things like that I worked along the way. But I am now a software engineer with the Navy. And then just some other things that I enjoy doing on the side. I play guitar. I'm into photography, playing video games, things like that. I also have a picture on the side here of me and my wife and two of our cats. So yeah, and the main thing that I'm really excited to talk to y'all about today is kind of just my career progression and how I really didn't even know what I wanted to do in high school. I'm sure a lot of y'all probably are in a similar situation. It's kind of scary thinking about in high school having to make the big decision of what you want to do with the rest of your life. But whenever I was in high school, I didn't know it all. And whenever I first started college, I didn't know either. I started out as a biology major because I thought I'd maybe want to go into the healthcare field. And then as I started doing some of that coursework, I really just didn't enjoy it much. And I had some interest in computers and things like that growing up. So at first, I was thinking maybe I would go into electrical engineering. And the main reason for that was I heard that that was what you should go into if you want to do something like computer engineering. And I started out there. Didn't really fully enjoy everything with electrical engineering either, but in some of my classes, there was programming work. And I did really enjoy the programming side. I liked writing code. So then I decided, well, maybe I should try out computer science. And from there, I really enjoyed computer science. And I switched my major to that and just decided that that was what I was going to stick with. And yeah, so moving from there, so like I mentioned, I went to the University of New Orleans to get my bachelor's degree in computer science. As I already mentioned, I switched around a little bit. And my first internship from the University of New Orleans, I worked after my sophomore year. Over that summer, I got an internship at Ochsner. That's a kind of Louisiana-based hospital chain. And they have a health record software called Epic. And what I was a Epic analyst intern over there. Basically, I worked in sort of the configuration and maintenance of some specific parts of the Epic system. I worked with the operating room software, so everything that doctors use to log their whole process of doing surgeries, as well as the anesthesia software. And I actually worked this during COVID. One of the things that I remember working on was Epic has some like built-in things to be able to read through people's health records. And I remember actually working on some of the implementation of figuring out if people had their COVID vaccines or anything before surgery so that we could figure out if we needed to message them about making sure they had their vaccinations or things like that, depending on what the requirements of each hospital was, because this was for all of Ochsner's hospitals, and some of them had different rules about it at the time. After that, I then, bouncing back a little bit, after that summer, I, of course, went back to school still to complete my junior year. During that time, I worked a Thomas Scholars research position. So Thomas Scholars is something that the University of New Orleans has specifically. I got to work with some of the professors that were doing computer science research. And I wanted to bring that up mainly because, like a university position, is not really something that I really thought of much as a potential job or something even similar to an internship that you could put on your resume. But I just wanted to throw that out there for whenever y'all do eventually get to college, having something like that in mind. And And yeah, so then moving on to the summer of my junior year, I then worked an internship at a company called DXC Technology. I was specifically a data engineer intern. So a data engineer is, and I'm going to get through some of the more specifics of software engineering and all a little later. I kind of just wanted to give this general breadth of what my career path looked like first. But a data engineer essentially is the person who is behind making sure all the data in an application is able to get into our databases cleanly and make sure that all of the systems that developers need to collect that data and use it is set up in the easiest fashion possible. So yeah, that was a really good opportunity. After that, I went on to my senior year at UNO, and then at the same time, I actually got a part-time internship with NASA as a software engineer intern. While I was there, I was working on a project called the Celestial Mapping System. It's a project that was related to the overall goal was to make mappings of the moon at the time that I was there. Eventually, it was going to expand into more celestial bodies, but we were mainly focusing on the moon. So I got to learn some of GIS, that's Geographic Information Systems. So that's relating to how you're able to take these satellite scans that people have and put them on to whatever sort of graphical representation you want and have that and be able to use code to do some really cool things with it, right? So one of the things I was able to do while I was there was program out a representation of a moon landing mission. So I was able to show where the like the exact coordinates where the moon landing was going to happen and all of the nearby craters, any sort of structures on the moon that the mission planners would need to know about. So that was a really good time. And then also graphics programming is involved with that. And yeah, and then after that, I graduated with my degree and I went on to be a software engineer for the Navy, which is the position that I'm still in now. I started that in June of 2023. So I'm coming up on 2 years with the Navy now. And yeah, so that's kind of been just a quick summary of, going back from figuring out what I wanted to do in college all the way through internships that I worked and actually getting my degree in my first job. So moving on. So I know I've thrown a lot of terms out there. So I kind of just wanted to take a step back and ask the question, what is software engineering? So I sort of just have this one sentence, super easy summary of it. Software engineers write instructions or code that tells hardware what to do. So before expanding on that some, I wanted to ask y'all a question. First off, I want you to think of some like apps and websites that you usually use, and then ask the question, what do you think the software is telling the hardware to do for those applications?
Anybody have one?
It's probably telling it to do when and how to do so.
When and how to do certain actions.
That's exactly right. So anyone else real quick? Anything else you
Anybody?
want to add to that?
Go ahead.
Probably requesting things a bunch.
Yes, yes. Okay, yeah. So it sounds like y'all kind of understand some of the basics of what we do in the industry. So yeah, so basically computers, a lot of people think are these super smart things. They are, but at the end of the day, it usually comes down to how well somebody is able to program and instruct that computer to do those things, right? If you're not able to tell the computer what to do, exactly how to do it, then it's not going to be able to do it. So that's essentially what software engineers are tasked with doing, right? We are able to get into the code and write out every system for figuring out, for example, on a database, how do we make sure that the data is clean, right? For making a button on an application, for example, like a login page, right? Whenever somebody logs into an application, they'll put in their username, they'll put in their password, they click the login button, and then after that, the user doesn't have to really think about much after that. But the software engineers are setting up the system so that whenever they click that button, they are able, that information is sent to a server. The server is then able to check the database to see if that's a valid username or password. If it is, then it's able to pass a success message for logging in and then load whatever page is relevant next, right? So if you're logging in on Amazon, for example, then it'll just bring you back to your home page and you can start shopping on your account. So yeah, so that's kind of the quickest, easiest way I would explain software engineering. Obviously, it gets way more complex, but at a base level, that's kind of what your job is every day. You are essentially writing code to solve a specific thing. And yeah, so moving on from there, I wanted to kind of talk about some of the things that I do as a software engineer. So, like I mentioned, I am a software engineer for the Navy, specifically for the Naval Information Warfare Center, the Atlantic side. That's actually this first picture on the left here is a picture of where I work. I work in that middle building there. And yeah, so some of my daily tasks include obviously writing a lot of code. This can be anything from just general like tweaking some buttons that our customer maybe wants to look a little bit differently, or writing out entire new pages in the application, adding new features. From there, testing and debugging. That is a very common thing that a lot of people don't really think about as being part of the software engineering process. A lot of the time, you write code and it doesn't really work how you expect it at first. So you write it, you start testing it, you find some issues with it, and then you debug those issues, right? So you essentially try to, maybe there's an edge case that you didn't really think about, something that is, completely unstandard with how you would think a user would use the application. And you have to code in some of those guardrails to either like notify the user, hey, this isn't the correct. For example, you may see this all the time with when you're making your password, right? Usually websites will want you to have your passwords be a certain amount of characters long, include a certain amount of numbers or special characters or something like that. So yeah, other than that, daily stand up and other meetings. So yeah, so every day at my work, we specifically have a meeting called a stand up, and that's at 10 o'clock every day. All of the engineers on the team get together and we talk about what we did yesterday and we talk about what we plan to do for today. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of times where when you're writing out your code, you sort of run into some things that block you from being able to do more work, right? It may just be something as simple as you're not understanding how to implement something that the customer may have requested. It could be that, some update to one of the tools that you use is actually blocking you from doing more work because maybe it's broken now. So those meetings are really valuable to be able to talk to everybody, put out your blockers out there, and be able to get help from everyone, right? So that's something that we generally do a lot, right? Is we're able to help each other. It's not this thing where we just go in, we clock in, we write code, we don't really talk to everybody else, and then we leave at the end of the day, right? We are usually helping everybody with solving the problems. And then moving on to that next point, problem solving and learning. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, software engineering is constant problem solving, right? It's figuring out how to make this computer do exactly what you want it to do, to make either something that you're really excited about building, right? It could be, not even related to my job. It could be something like if you want to be a game developer, it could be making a game that you really like. It could be making some sort of business idea that you have. In my case, it is usually in my actual work, it's usually figuring out how to get exactly what our customer needs. Just to give a kind of basic idea of the application I work on, I mainly work on application that's used for calibrating different equipment in the Navy, making acquisitions for new equipment, right? So buying new things, getting contracts out there. And yeah, so the application that I work on is what a lot of people internationally in the Navy use. So even people that are stationed outside of the US will use to be able to do all of those things. So I already kind of touched on some of these things, but some soft skills that I use every day. Obviously, like I already said, teamwork. You're only in the world of software engineering, there's always different point of views on how you can write code to solve a specific problem. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. And usually like working with other people, especially in my case, I'm a younger engineer on the team, and being able to work with the people who have been on the project longer and have been in the industry longer, working with them not only benefits me by making sure I'm able to get my work done, but it teaches me a lot every single day. And that also goes into some of the communication, right? Constant communication is really important. If you're stuck on any issues, we don't only talk about that type of stuff at the daily stand-up. We'll obviously communicate with each other throughout the day. And yeah, and then active listening. So that's obviously really important. If you don't fully understand everything that like all of the requirements that the customer has, then you need to make sure that you know that you don't understand that, right? So like whenever the customer is talking about a new feature that they want, for example, be open to asking questions while they're talking about it, and really just make sure you nail down your actual understanding of it and that you're actually really listening to what they want. Of course, those requirements can always change in the future, and that's fine. That's part of being a software engineer. Sometimes you'll code something up and you actually show it to the customer and they're like, I think I want to tweak this a little bit. I think I want this workflow to go like in a different direction, or maybe it's just as simple as some user interface fixes, right? They just want a button to behave a little bit differently or look a little bit differently. So yeah, I think that kind of covers some of the main things in my day to day. From there, I wanted to talk about some different careers in computer science. And I really wanted to touch on this some because I think that computer science is it almost sounds like it's not a very broad field, but it is. There's a lot of things that you can specialize in this industry. So I've already talked about software engineering and software development some. But of course, that isn't just limited to the things that I do. So I mainly work on a web application, but of course, you can also go into mobile development. You can go into game development. There's a bunch of different industries for software development. Something that's kind of becoming popular right now is VR. That's a whole nother world that's still being figured out. So VR, game development, or even just VR applications, right? Right now, there's a lot of effort to try and make VR applications where people could put their headset on and work inside of it. So they have like a portable, monitor set up with their headsets and things like that. So yeah, so there's a bunch of different in options that you have within software development. Cybersecurity is another one, of course, making sure that applications are secure. That's incredibly important. And it's an industry that is kind of probably just never going anywhere, no matter what, right? Even in this world of AI, which I may touch on a little bit in a minute here. A lot of people sometimes get worried about if software development can be replaced with AI. Or if the computer science field as a whole could eventually get replaced. But no matter what, you're always going to need secure systems. So yeah, moving on from there, data science, this is another very broad field. So it can be as simple as being something like a data analyst, right? And that job title is almost a little bit more self-explanatory, right? You're able to analyze data for whatever your company needs it for, right? So it could be if you work for a bank, it could be something to create dashboards for everybody who is a customer at that bank for seeing their spending habits, right? More advanced data science is something like risk analysts, right? Or fraud analysts at banks, right? So they are able to take in common actions of a specific user and make models that can kind of see if things are really outside of that action, right? They make a really big purchase in a different country or something like that, then they'll report that this is potentially fraudulent activity. And that's kind of how that field works. So it's all based on data science. Also within data science is machine learning and AI, right? We hear AI thrown around a lot nowadays, and data science is kind of the field that that's built on, right? Like a lot of things like ChatGPT, Gemini, all those different AI platforms, they're essentially just what you call a large, or I'm sorry, a language learning model. So basically, those are just able to take in a bunch of data on everything that's ever been on the internet. And then whenever you ask it a question, it's able to go through all of that data and give you a response that it thinks is going to be good enough for you, right? And yeah, so that's kind of a gross summary of that specific field, but a lot of that is all resting on data science. It wouldn't be possible without data science. So moving on to DevOps. So DevOps is, well, it stands for developer operations, right? So it's basically the person that's behind configuring everything that developers use, right? So whenever I push up code, where is that code going? It's usually going to some sort of repository, like a server that's able to save all that code. There's pipelines, which is just like automated tasks that run to test my code. Whenever the code is ready to go into the actual production application, that is all automated through DevOps, right? So it automatically is able to push that code onto the actual production server and get it running. So, and then quality assurance is another one. My brother-in-law was a game tester for a little while for a company. And this is a field that you don't really think about as much, but you're essentially the person that's responsible for testing that code works as expected. It can sometimes be a fun field because your basic goal is to see if you can break everything. And if you can, then you give that information back to the developers to be able to fix it. So, yeah, that's kind of just a few careers in computer science. That isn't everything. There's so much in the field, but I kind of wanted to touch on some of the more popular ones. And then really quickly, I know we're sort of starting to run through some time here, but really quickly, I wanted to talk about the interview process of a typical computer science job. So usually if you start applying for a job out of college, you will typically get a general phone screening, right? So let's say you apply to a place like Amazon or something like that. The recruiter will give you a call and they'll do sort of like a general screening to first off, make sure you're a real person and all that in the age of AI and all. And then from there, they'll set up a behavioral round of interview questions for you. So you'll go through that. They'll kind of talk about some more general things of like how would you deal with a specific problem with a coworker, and kind of see how you would operate on their team, right? And see if you're a good fit for the people on that team. And then from there is usually more technical rounds. This can just be one round. Sometimes for like more senior positions or something like that, this can be multiple rounds of technical questions. So I've had some technical interviews that are as basic as like asking me some more general questions about how something works in a programming language like Java, for example. And then I've had more advanced ones where they're actually asking you to write code to solve a specific problem. So it can really vary depending on the company